Hi, welcome to Ancestry Unpacked in June 2026. I'm Fiona Brooker,
And I'm Michelle Patient.
and we're excited to have you here with us viewing this. So today we're going to be talking about family trees. I'm going to jump off and do that first, and then Michelle's going to be back a little bit later on talking about AI birth indexes in the Irish Census of 1926. So let's dive straight into talking about family trees. And I know that for lots of you, you have one of these sitting inside your Ancestry account. But I wanted to take you through pushing all of the buttons to check out what you can change about your family tree, how you access it, what can be seen, and just show you all the different places that there are different pieces that you can touch, tweak, and change. So let's start from this view, which is showing you this menu down the left-hand side of the screen. And this menu has lots of different options for changing some of the settings in your tree. And so we're going to work through this menu, and then we're going to jump into some of the other places that you can look through your tree. So let's talk to start off with this little button at the top, which is basically taking you through the different ways you can view your tree. So this is the horizontal view. Now, I would call this an ancestry chart or maybe a pedigree chart. Different people have different names for it, but what you're looking at here is just you and your ancestors, or the person in your tree and their ancestors. So just direct lines. You're not getting any brothers, you're not getting any sisters, no aunts, uncles, etc. You then have the second option, which is a vertical tree. Now, I would call this a drop line tree because basically each time you come down a line, you are coming down a generation in that tree. And so everyone along that generation is that same link back to some of those common ancestors. So that can really help when you're trying to work out, are you cousins, first cousins, once removed, twice removed, and all those different generational connections between those different lines. Then you have a fan chart. Now, this is on my Memories in Time tree. It's a pretty pitiful fan chart, I have to say, for this one, because it's only showing you Ernest and his parents, mainly because I haven't done the research on this particular line. But you do have more chances, and I will show you another version of this a little bit later on. So that's your three main views, but there is a fourth one, which is the list view. And this lists out all the people that are in your family tree. And sometimes that can be quite a good way because you know somebody's in there, but you can't find them. So it's another way of being able to sort of look alphabetically at all the people that are in your tree. Next button going down the side is the gallery. I'm not going to talk about the gallery today. I'm going to be talking about that in a future session, so watch out for that. Then we come down to Find in Tree, and as soon as you click Find in Tree, this screen opens on the right-hand side of the your family tree. And so within here, you can type somebody's name to find them in a tree, just like I was saying about using that alphabetical list to find someone. So you can jump in there, find someone within the tree. You can see who the home person is. You can see who you last viewed. So if you want to go back to who the person was that you were last researching, you've got both last viewed and last edited sitting in there as well. Next option down in the menu, hints. Now, I know some people have reactions to hints, which maybe they're not so keen on them, but I actually really like hints. And being able to see them on this screen, see all your hints, can be really useful because you have a little bit more control over what you're seeing here. Now, this is showing me all the hints within my tree. So in this tree at the moment, I think I've got 820 hints sitting there, of which 500 plus come from records. But the one that I really like the most in this hint screen is actually the one at the bottom, which says New Collections. Because if you have brand new collections that have been added to the website, this will take you to the hints that are coming from those collections. So if you feel like you've looked at a lot of things before, this can be a really good way of getting in. So there was none in this Memories in Time tree, but over in my own tree, there was a hint to some Yorkshire parish records or bishop's transcripts that had come through and been added to the site. And the really good thing is if you haven't been keeping up with what's been released recently, well, you need to be watching the Ancestry Unpacked news. So that's coming out once, twice a month, and it will go through what some of those new record collections are. So watch out for that. Now I'm going to put Michelle on the spot now because now I'm going to ask her to spot the differences. And you can be thinking about this as well. What are the differences between these two tree shots that I have put on the screen for you? What's changed?
The main one is that Ernest's two relationships, I won't be rude enough to say marriage because it might not have been, are both showing on the left-hand side. But the little hamburger button on Ernest on the right is really indicating that there's other information here with other relationships.
Absolutely. Can you see another difference?
No, oh yeah, relationships. So on the left-hand one, you've actually made sure you've notified who the home person is, and therefore the relationships are showing up. And you obviously don't have that on the right-hand version.
Absolutely correct. And so how do you get those to turn off and turn on? Well, that is sitting under those three dots, or sometimes called the hamburger. So those three dots have some things, when you click on that, another sort of sub-menu about your tree. And the top one of those is tree viewing options. And so that will also open the panel on the right-hand side. And within there, we have, first of all, the on-off button for the relationship. So that's the one that shows whether or not and how that person is related to the people above them. So in this case, that it's his grandparents, that it's his parents, etc. The next button down turns off whether or not you see all spouses. And we speak about spouses, even though, as Michelle identified, some of them may not be the people that you have actually married and that whole spouse by marriage, but it could be a partner, etc. So you can see those in there as well. The next one down shows comments, and in the tips, no, our last webinar, I was talking about how and why you might use comments in your family tree. So this will show that little red icon to say whether or not there are comments for a person in your tree. And again, it's an on-off switch, so you can turn it on and off if you want that little comment icon to show. And then the last section down here is dark mode or light mode. Now, my preference is dark mode. I find this a little bit too bright for my eyes when I'm staring at the computer quite a lot, but I know that for some people this may be a better mode for being able to visualize and see what's on their tree as well. So again, it's a toggle switch, it's an on-off. You can change any combination of those and just see how you feel about it. Jumping down that menu a little bit more, you have this option called Tree Overview. So this lets you see sort of what's happening in your tree as an overview. So it tells you maybe if you've, like me, you've sort of written a bit of a message about the tree, especially if you've created some trees for other parts of your family. Maybe you've created a tree because you're helping a friend. And so you just want to write a little note to remember why you created a tree. You can see the gallery and the documents or anything that you've added there. And then down the right-hand side, again, you have a bit of a summary, including things like who's the home person in your tree, who's the last viewed, etc. And then you can see, again, a summary of those hints, a summary of how many documents, etc. have been added to your tree as well. Okay, next one, I just wanted to talk about this home person idea and what that sort of means. In my tree, my home person is Ernest Partridge. And what that means is if I've gone somewhere else in the tree, so I've jumped down into a totally different part of this tree at the moment, and now I want to go back to my home person, then I can click on the little house. Now that home person, for a lot of people, that home person will be themselves because it's my tree. I'm the home person that this tree is built around. However, you do have the ability to choose someone else as your home person as well. Now, that can be useful sometimes if you're working a project and you just want to keep going back to a specific person as you're building out a tree. But I do prefer, for me, I prefer to go back and change it back to me at some stage after I've done that project work. I just find it an easier place for when I want to start if I can find myself in my own tree. So that home person, you have a couple of options of where you can change and where you can edit that person as well. And one of those is hiding under the tree settings. And so again, I'm still in that three-dot menu on the side to get to tree settings. Then I've got my tree info. That's where I wrote that lovely description about what this family tree is all about. I can have the on-off button down there with that wee tick saying whether or not I want to automatically build stories for this tree. So that's an on-off option in there. And then on the right-hand side, I can either add a home person if I haven't done that already. I can change the home person, or I can set no home person on this tree. And they all have pros and cons about what you're doing. But also in the next little section down, I can actually go in and say who I am in this tree as well. But there doesn't seem to be as much navigation around that. Hint preferences, you have the ability to change what hints you get to see. Then you get to manage your tree, and one of the options there is to export your tree. And when you export, you'd be exporting what we call a GEDCOM file, which is a file that is standard between many family history programs, so that you could potentially upload it to somewhere else if you wanted a backup. If you wanted to use some of the reporting tools out of another program, for example, can be quite useful as well. So that's an export option. It will come as a file that has lots of data in it that you may never actually open and look at in its raw format. So you're generally using it just as a vehicle to move between family history programs. So that's hiding under your tree settings. And then probably the most dangerous button at all is the delete button at the very bottom. If for some reason you need to delete your tree, you'll notice it comes with a great big warning saying this action cannot be undone. That means that if you delete that tree, and yes, you will get another warning, there is no way of getting it back once it is deleted. So be careful with that one. Not a button that I'm going to go and play with too much. Also under the tree settings, and I'm just now moving along this menu at the top, is probably the one that you possibly go looking for and use the most often, which is the privacy settings on how you want your tree set up. So here is where you can choose the sort of two main options on your tree. The first being that it is a public tree. Public meaning that everyone else can view your content. So if my tree is public, the Memories in Time tree is public, you can go and look at it, except that the information about living individuals will be set as private. So you won't be able to see names, dates for living people within a public tree. That's why they always come up private when you're looking at those trees. So these are a huge benefit to the community out there who are using Ancestry, because you are able to work out how people are related to each other. You are able to get some hints about how your tree and their tree may come together, etc. So it's well worth being able to set a tree public, but I also understand that for some people they need their tree to be set at private. This means others cannot view your tree. So you will see that this comes up in a separate collection of trees. It will become searchable, but it will not show you how you are connected, how that person is connected to other trees. But again, only the deceased people's information will turn up in those private tree searches. I'm sure you've seen them come up in your results where it goes, please contact the member who has created this tree for further information. You also have a tick box here that allows you to make this tree not be found in searches as well. So I know for some of us, we're working on some sensitive information, some sensitive trees for some reason. So this is where you would change that as well. Now, others can be invited to your public or private trees. And so this is the next tab along on that menu at the top for tree settings, which is invitations. You can invite somebody to share your family tree, and that could be a public tree or that could be a private tree. And both of those you can invite people to. So this is one method to get to those invitations through the tree settings. And basically you invite either by email or a display name. But the other way that you can do it is you can just click on the invite button off that menu and you'll get to exactly the same screen as such. So what you're doing there within these is you have three different options, and I've sort of coloured them like traffic lights here in Down Under, where red is stop. this means the person is a guest. They can view, they can leave comments, and you have an on-off option to whether or not they can see living people. The next level is contributor. This is sort of a mix of the two as such. So they can view, leave comments, they can add stories, they can add photographs. And again, you have an on-off option as to whether or not they can see living people. Now, that's really good if you want to collaborate with some other family members because you're building the tree together and you want them to be able to add their stories, add their photos, etc. to the one tree. But maybe you're not quite sure about how much you want them to be editing, which is the next level. So there you've got an editor who does get to view living people. They can leave comments, they can add stories, they can add photos, and they can add people. So they can start adding and deleting people within your family tree. So once you give someone the full editor, the full green light, they can basically just like you as far as using your family tree. Okay, now there's this other little button that's called activity, and I found this quite an interesting little button because one of the things that you can see on here is what were the things that you last did? And sometimes that can be really useful to be able to go back and almost get an audit trail of what you've done in the past, because maybe you go, there was something I was doing the other day and I can't quite remember what I was doing. This is where you can go and find out what were you doing last. So you can jump back and you can say, oh, that's right, I was adding some notes to George Partridge, or I was adding a comment, or I was updating that person. That's where I want to go back and continue the research that I was doing. So that activity button can be really useful to see that. Now, I'm not going to go into printing because I'm guessing that you've all possibly played with that, but just remember it will only print what it can see on the screen. The create a keepsake is the ability to create books. And I'm going to be talking about prioritized people in the future. And I know Michelle talked about Pro Tools and things like that in a couple of weeks ago. I think Michelle talked about that. But there is another place you can play with some settings to do with your tree, and that's up under your profile in the top right-hand corner. And there's a section there called Account Settings. And if you click on that account settings, you will get to this part here. Now, I'm going to start with the public profile, which I know is not quite the tree, but I wanted to show you what people see about you on your family tree, and if they're looking at you as a tree contributor. So up on the top left-hand corner, this is what people see on my profile. This is my public profile for anyone coming to see about Fiona Brooker. Now, the other option up there is private, is what you get to see, and which is where you can edit anything that is showing here. But in this public profile, if someone came to look at mine, they would find I have a lot of family trees. And so a lot of people would not know what those family trees mean to me, how those family trees work, etc. So some of them are public, some of them are private, some of them are projects, some of them are things like the Memories in Time tree, which you can see. So you can see I have a mix of both public trees, the ones that are in light blue with the little green tree beside them, and private trees, the one with the padlocks against them. So you can actually, underneath your public profile, if you scroll down, you have the ability of those settings to decide who gets to see your list of family trees. Do you want everyone to see all the family trees you have, or do you want to be the person who sees them? So if you click in that button there, it will show anyone who views your profile will see your public and searchable trees, or only you will see your public and searchable trees. So it is a way of controlling that access as well. Okay, a couple of last things on these trees. Remember these hints about possible ancestors? So they can be really, really useful, or they can be quite distracting depending on what you're trying to do at the time with your family tree. So again, if I go back to my settings, in the trees part of this, I have the ability to turn those on or off to whether or not they get viewed or shown to me when I'm using my family tree. So it's, again, an on-off toggle button. I also get to on-off toggle whether or not other people's trees come up in my hints. And the other one down at the bottom is, do I want the new hint indicator at the top of the page? Again, yes or no, and that's your choice. There's also this other little thing that tells me who was the last person to go and view my family tree. Also another little audit thing that you can go and have a look at as well. And then the last little bit I want to take you through is just to talk about this and how it links to your DNA. Because what I wanted to show you in particular is the fact that when you go into your DNA results, people will have one of basically three different types of tree. They have a public tree, they have a private tree, or they have an unlinked tree. Public and private, we've already discussed. The unlinked tree, and this one here is all the names and everything that I'm showing you here have been changed for privacy. An unlinked tree is where somebody has not linked themselves from their DNA to themselves in their tree. So you need to remember that when you're looking at, if you find by going to their profile that they have a tree, that doesn't mean that that tree with the home person is that DNA tester, although we do hope that they are. So just being a little bit careful with that. And then the other little piece I wanted to talk to you about are the fact is if you want your through lines to work, you need a linked family tree coming through. So you need to have done exactly the step, which is to link your DNA to yourself and your tree. But the great thing about family trees is there's always something more to do. And remember, I told you I'd show you another version of the fan chart. I'm just about got the full Monty, but there's a few in there that show me exactly where I need to be focusing my research. But I sneaking suspicion I might never crack some of those brick walls. But wish me luck, and I wish you luck as well, having a go and just changing some of those settings on your family trees.
Hi everyone, there was so much in that with tree settings, so you might want to pause now and rush off for a cuppa and come back. But mine will be succinct and a bit short on a few issues that are really about records that were only recently released. And I didn't have enough time in the news bulletin to dive into some of the things within them that I thought many of you would like to know a little bit more about. So firstly, these were pretty huge data sets, really, from the point of view of those of us with UK, Irish, Australian, New Zealand and Canadian research. So I didn't alphabetise the order. That is the order that they were released at Ancestry, so the date order they've been added. But nearly 6 million from the newspapers have created, using AI, a birth index for us to use, all for the same time frame. So 6 million for up over, 2 million nearly for down under, and 4.4 nearly for Canada. And the key thing to remember with all of these is these newspaper indexes, as the newspapers grow and as privacy requirements change, you're going to find we're going to get more information added to these. And I would expect easily these to get close to double the size as time progresses. So let's just have a bit of a dive into the first one, seeing as it was the most recently released UK and Ireland newspapers. I hope you are all shouting back at me. If this is the first time you're looking, don't forget to scroll down and read the context of this document. So this set of data, what sort of fields we're able to look at, what time frame, and anything socially we need to be clear about understanding so that we can search more effectively. And this particular data set actually gives us a social timeline of when family history events became common in the United Kingdom and Ireland in the newspapers. So it was well before civil registration. The the terminology of hatch, match, and dispatch, man, it's been documented back into the 1850s. But if you scroll down further, you'll also see some really wonderful bibliographies, including the lovely Audrey Collins, may she rest in peace. She was the most wonderful archivist that was at the National Archives in Kew, and she's written a number of useful guides as the family historian specialist at that archive. But all very useful, but particularly bearing in mind that poor and working class people couldn't generally afford it. They, some newspapers charged you per letter, not per word. Every newspaper, of course, was different. Newspapers to me are fascinating. It's a standalone lecture really in their own right. But newspapers adding and enhancing to our family research are very important and useful, and little gems can be found. But what are you going to do? Well, my family's a pretty poor lot. So when I actually did a search on patient, there was one useful record of someone that wasn't living, and I didn't want to offend the YouTube universe by putting any details up that may breach somebody's privacy. So the only one I could show you was this one that said patient and Jensen. And I thought, I know the guy that does our one name study in our name, and I don't recall any Jensens marrying into the family. I must have a good look. And before I show you the good look, I'll just draw your attention to how the image showing on our left-hand side here is quite muddy looking. There's a lot of ink bleed or aging of this newspaper. And that's the thing for all of us to remember. The quality of the indexing is only really as good as a combination of things, and that's the quality and clarity of the original. And with newspapers, the way the print is put onto the page, the depth of amount of ink, as well as the how open the actual paper is. Some of it absorbs better and bleeds and bulks up, and it becomes very difficult for the computers to identify what's going on. So whether it was the traditional optical character recognition, where they used to look piece by piece of each pixel and try to relate this group of pixels to see if it meant this was a letter, that's the old one number. That's the old days. AI is one of those things outside of my universe of level of understanding to the depth that I can just tell you some really clever algorithms now have pulled this information out for us to find things more accessibly. So let's have a look at the patient one close up, given all that ink, and you'll see that it doesn't really look much like patient at all when you zoom in. And funnily enough, it doesn't even look like Jensen either, because those two S's have bled together unless you look in very closely. And Walter could be P-A-L-L-A-N-T in that smaller font, or is he P-A-L-I-N-T? And thank goodness that Ancestry has given us some tools for us to help change our view and adjust some of the settings in this image. So if you've never dug in here before, please do click on that little black and white half circle, because that's giving us control over brightness and contrast. But the one I love the most is the little button at the bottom called invert. And if you click on invert, I've now given you the two screenshots, one, the normal view and the inverted view. And for my eyes, and maybe it's my age, the bottom inverted view is much clearer for me to see the correct spellings. So if you haven't used that before, you might want to do that in going through this and you're digging into documents online, not just newspapers. But this is how things used to look, and literally in the last few weeks, a new version of how Ancestry shows records on the screen. But I just thought I'd have the memory moment for those of you that may not have used your Ancestry records service much lately. This is how it used to look, and we used to be able to update the information, which is what I want to do, because it's not patient and Jensen, but Pallant and Jessen. So in the old days, I'd click on add and update information. But if you've had a look lately, it looks like this now. So where has that wonderful stuff gone that was over underneath the icon of the image of the document? Well, it's now over here under 3 dots. 3 dots is old-fashioned typing for those of you that don't remember things like inverted V's being insert here and green ink being inspectors. Bottoms of pages in typing 3 dots meant there's more. So whenever you see 3 dots, always think there's more, and what can I do but click on it, because when any time a screen is new, have a good look around. And when I see what is new down under this more, it's actually the same as the old things that used to sit under the image and take up space. So partly for us, the details section is now further up the screen. And if I go right down the bottom, I can see all the source information for this individual item, as well as the one level back further up, as we showed a couple of slides back. So if I want to add or update this information, I now get a more rounded field view, just slightly tweaked the style to make it more pleasing to our eyes. If I want to check that I need to fix those names, I get this drop down menu with what fields within this data set I want to change. And then I need to make sure I give a reason. So I could type away, but you'll see 3 of those red asterisks mean I must provide something in here. So while I don't have to give a given name or a prefix or suffix, or I don't even need to give the surname, I can put whatever I like in there, but I must say which field I want to change and why do I want to change this. If I feel it's necessary, I will also go towards the bottom and explain the source or my update. I've been doing these for years. I've only once needed to explain a source because it wasn't a transcription error. It was incorrect information and I needed to supply the supporting evidence. So I pointed to where the correct evidence was from. So most of the time you're not going to need that last piece of information. But once you've filled in all the blanks, choose the transcription error and press the rest of the info you want to update. And in this case, because the Ancestry website had the square brackets around Jensen, see my eyesight's not great and I managed to do an extra dot, extra closed brackets, but I tried to mimic the format that they used so it would be more readily picked up. So at the time this index was generated, because it is generated by the AI, those weren't active links, but my update ones, that I've done it for both names, both Dorothy's maiden name and William Walter's full surname, I've put those 2 links. Ancestry has a separate collation of these corrections, all linked behind the scenes, so that if we search for a surname, talent, this will now come up. The reason we can't edit the actual index that we see on the screen is that quite often any company with with indexing services don't always own the index. They own the right to publish the documents and create records that are searchable for us and publish the actual images, but the index of that image may have been created by the original owners and that Ancestry can't edit it, which is why we need to do those corrections. And I'm most grateful that behind the scenes, there's a separate indexing process, which means these are now searchable because of the actual global index that Ancestry has built behind the scenes. That isn't actually the index just for this data set. Hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, there will be a video up by the time you watch this to tell you where you can go and ask us some questions if you get stuck. And so the other really large data set that would have affected many people that came out last month was the Irish 1926 census. And I just wanted to show you a couple of key things, as sadly for me, my research is all much earlier, so I just picked a family name. But before I did that, I remembered, and I want you to be shouting back at the screen, I remembered to scroll down so I could actually see what was available, what kind of information I could expect. It tells me about different household forms. It tells me that this actually comes from a different organisation. It also tells me the boundaries of where to find these records, so that no, Northern Ireland isn't included. It even tells me why it's not included. For those of you that may or may not remember, there is actually a border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, and Ireland, which is actually a standalone country. So there's a lot of context information as usual. Thank you very much to Ancestry. So I thought, oh, look, I'll just in for penny, in for pound. I'll put in a surname of my husband's family that I'm starting to have a couple of breakthroughs on. They arrived in 1859 out to New Zealand. Uh, so I'm not easily going to find relatives. None have turned up in DNA, I'm sad to say. But I'm not expecting to find anybody particularly helpful for me back in the census, but I still wanted to use it as an example for you all. So if you see when I typed in, if you look in the left-hand corner under where it says view search, so over here, I've used lowercase and I did include a comma. I mean, you know, see, can you tell some days one shouldn't talk out loud? The apostrophe. So O'Dowd, and there's over 3,000 of these wonderful people. Okay, but just to be sure, I actually did a search without the apostrophe, and there's 800 of them. And I can hear some of you yelling at me already, but these all have the comma, the apostrophe. So I'm going to do that for the rest of the talk. Well, actually, there's a big index for this data set. Many of these people are not the only person in a household. And so what it's telling me is that somebody else in that household has been indexed without a comma. And like I said, oh, comma, see, I'm just going to be stuck with that. You can all laugh now for the rest of the episode. That's what happens when you get viral meningitis and it fries your brain a bit and you do this flippy stuff all the time. Interesting form of dyslexia. So I have just randomly picked one for the good of all of you, and I just picked Mary O'Dowd and thought, oh, that's interesting. She too, having done the patient thing already and got the person who was not Jensen but Jessen. Oh, look, there's a McCanton. This will be interesting. So great. Dug further. This is the old screen as it looked, and I really like the archives drawing my attention that this is a data set source from somewhere. Also, the fact that this is a word on the left over here tells me this means I'm going to get this information from somewhere else. This is not information held within the Ancestry universe. Now, the blessing for all of us is that the National Archives in Ireland created a data set that was granted Creative Commons license. So we are going to be able to readily keep this information within our tree and access it for free. Hooray! So heading back over to what the screen looks like today, because literally it's recently updated, I've lost some of that imagery that drew my attention anyway to the records coming from elsewhere. So I just want to remind you that sometimes when you see no visual image on the screen, so no digital icon sitting there to tell us something, that tends to mean it's either a straight index with no attached images, or this index has come from another source and we need to head outside the Ancestry universe. So I was still intrigued, thinking, yeah, on a census, have we got this other surname? Has Mary got a stepfather in the household and this is his surname and, the mum's remarried? So because I'm curious and I always want to know these things, I clicked on some more buttons. Well, actually, I scrolled down first and I scrolled down to find here's the Uniform Resource Locator, the URL, could be called Universal Resource Locator, and it really depends on where you went to school and your computing last century, which term you use. But suffice to say, if I click on that before it takes me anywhere, Ancestry is letting me know that I'm going outside of Ancestry, that it's located elsewhere. It will open in a separate tab and you might need to search again when you get there. Well, thankfully we don't in this case. So when I pressed on visit site, it took me to one large image in the page. And I'm hoping you're all quite familiar with census documents. The very similar headings, which I'd want you all to make sure you read. Here's all the household that was shown in the record view of Mary O'Dowd. And you can see I'm starting to get curious because every surname on that page is O'Dowd. Right. But what else am I finding? Well, I'm finding the relationships for all of these people in 1926, their ages. Okay, some whatever else is going on about how many languages they speak and where they were born and do they read and write or are their parents alive. So the good thing to know is both parents are alive. Hooray, because we've only got the wife at the top of the page. Okay, and what they did, home duties. So one of them is assisting mother at home. So the poor thing's left school quite young, 15, and she's helping mum out at home. They're all of the same religious practice. But oh, look, one of them there is assisting my father on the farm. And there's Dad's name, Michael O'Dowd, farmer, and he's got 50 acres of land, which is a lot of family, but a reasonable amount of land for most parts of the country. And he's certainly not frightfully old either. He's about 12. So bearing that in mind, and Mary filled the form in, and there is no mention in this list of Michael. So that took me back to look at the full list again at the bottom of Mary's record view. And there's Peter McCanton, there's that surname at the top. He's indicated as the head of the house. He's 70. All the other information told me he was alive. Michael was the husband and he was alive. So where is he? I wish I knew. So what I did is I actually went out to the archive site and researched this family because I want to know how Peter fits into the mix. And when I went over there, you can see a single record about an individual, or you can look at the whole household. And that's what we're seeing on the screen is that the National Archives have grouped this full record set together as a whole household. And if you check on the right-hand side, you'll see that there are 3 different forms from this household, not just one. And how come is that? Well, Peter's on a standalone page on his own, and he's a widow. So it doesn't say he's the head of all the households because there's actually 2 houses, as it turns out, and he's on. And I wish I could be sure whether that was Michael, initial for Michael, or is that Mrs. O'Dowd, farmer, 50 acres of land. Same handwriting as the other person that wrote that, which is kind of interesting. So did he write that or did Mary? One needs to do more comparisons. And there was the 3rd page and it had a standalone, the youngest child, Nancy, and you'll see it says daughter and more about her as well. And Mary filled that form in. Peter filled in the first form. So we have Mary signing 2, and in the top right-hand corner of 2 of the documents, it says Michael O'Dowd, number 1, and Michael O'Dowd, number 2, but Michael O'Dowd wasn't actually recorded on any of these documents. A mystery to solve, some might call it a rabbit hole. I'm going to leave that mystery there. But the way I would deal with that is I would probably save Mary to my sandbox tree, which I do for private, unsearchable research where I am experimenting with my research and I'm not comfortable yet in saying this is public knowledge I wish to share with anyone. So you will have seen Fiona's many ways of having a tree. And this is one of those occasions where I would be doing private unsearchable research on a tree, adding this, because I'm left with the feeling that is Mary's mother's maiden name McCanton? Or was this just a bloke that was working on the farm and when he retired, he was considered the head of the household by the people that were walking around because he was the head of the first household, and in the other household there wasn't a head and I didn't know enough, and who knows. So it was just one of those things. There's always a rabbit hole, there's always more questions, but I hope this helps you get some insight into this set of documents and the other places to go and look so that you can come back and with confidence save this to your tree, and then all that data is available to you easily from one place. And there are many ways of linking data from outside the Ancestry universe, and this save button, whether it be in the newspapers or in this particular census, are a very useful tool for having that link to the outside world, because we all know not everything is in one place on the planet for all our research needs. So with that said, we're back with one of these every Friday, first Friday of the month. And Fiona and I do the tips and the news. So don't forget to subscribe and press the notification buttons. And Fiona and I thank you very much for watching. We look forward to seeing you here next Friday for our tips next week.